the city's been down and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. To today's video, we are here with, of course, another Detroit Lions video. And today, we're doing something a little bit different. Today, we are going through a Detroit Lions mock offseason. I believe this is the first mock offseason that we are uploading. But man, you guys know I love to do the mock offseason. If you don't know what a mock offseason is, you're in luck, okay? Because basically, a mock offseason is like taking a mock draft to the next level. Because it includes free agency, we're going to include UDFAs, and then at the very end we're going to tie it all together and have this final 53-man roster, sort of, just to kind of make everything clear. It's a lot of fun. They could take a long time. It's taking me a couple days to work on, but it's always fun when you go through it, free agency, the draft, everything like that. I already did it, so we're kind of going to go through the moves that I made. Now, this isn't necessarily a predictive mock offseason, like this is what I predict the Lions will do. It's more maybe some tendencies that I think the Lions may follow based on what I know about their history. Some guys that I grabbed, of course, are guys that I like, because if I didn't like them, I wouldn't draft them, because, you know, then what the heck is the point? So it's a little bit of both. This is, I guess, our 1.0 mock offseason. So we're going to waste no time. We're just going to dive right into this. We're going to start off with free agency first. If you're a little confused, don't be. We're just going to go through free agent signings first. Then we're going to take a look at the draft. You probably saw the title. There was a lot of movement in the draft. It was a lot of fun. And then we'll take a look at that final roster, and we'll throw in, you know, a practice squad idea, UDFAs to target with this draft, and the cap and everything like that. And that's why we're using this website, the Detroit Lions salary cap calculator, to just keep track of our financials. Now, I know you see the cap space, $17.8 million. It is a lot of cap space, but we had to make sure that we'd save some money because the draft that we brought in was kind of expensive. It was more expensive than what it's projected to be right now. Based on the Lions picks, I think it's projected to be about $10 million cap hit for 2021. Mine was pushing like 16, 17. So it was much more expensive, which is why I have more cap space, because I had to make sure I got into that threshold. But let's dive into this. Let's take a look at what we did in free agency. Now, I did add a little tweak to this. Every free agent signing, if I was able to find a projection through Pro Football Focus, I had to use that number. So basically, let's say I wanted to go sign this receiver. Pro Football Focus had a projection for what his contract would be. If I wanted that receiver, I'd have to sign him to that contract, just to keep it fair. That way I'm not like, oh, I'm going to go sign Juju Smith-Schuster, $2 million cap hit. Like, that's not realistic. Now, I did move some contracts around, backloaded a few to set it up just to save me some money, but for the most part, I kept it pretty simple for most signings. Before we get into the signings, I got a couple of moves that I want to point out. Hopefully I don't give too much away. Okay, here we go. First things first, Big V. So I see, you guys can see it, it's green. What I did with Big V is I gave him like a little contract restructure / pay cut. So basically I took $2 million off of his contract through the base salaries of 2022 and 2023, but I also gave him a $4 million signing bonus that will spread throughout his contract to save me a little bit of cap hit for 2021. I didn't want to give him a huge pay cut. I wanted to try to keep it realistic. And he's coming off of really his best season, just knowing that he's playing right guard. And I believe the Lions will keep him around. But to give him a nice little signing bonus, which he's going to get right away, spread out throughout his deal, which I can take money then off the base salary for 2021. I did $4 million. So $4 million off the base salary, spread it out throughout his deal. And then I just took $2 million off of his contract in general as like a mini pay cut, just because of how much he's getting paid, because we initially signed him to that 5-year, $45 million deal like a tackle, but he's playing guard. So he's a pretty expensive guard. So I lowered that contract a little bit, but mainly just restructured it to save myself some cap. So I wanted to point that out first. The next move that we made, the big one I should point out, is cutting Trey Flowers. We did make a lot of cuts, and we'll probably show those at some point in this video, but the big one was cutting Trey Flowers. I was considering making some trades, and I was looking around like what trades I could make, things like that. Ultimately, I just decided to cut Trey Flowers, keep it pretty basic. I know we're going to have to eat the $12 million dead cap for this season, and that stinks, but it gets us off the books going forward. It does save us still over $10 million for this year, so it did open up some cap. I think the Lions can be creative with this. I mean, they could go as far as trying to give him a big pay cut. They could go cut him. They could do a post-June 1st cut. Wouldn't help me a ton for free agency this year. They could try to do a trade. I would have loved to pull off a trade here, but I didn't do that. I just went with a basic cut just to keep it kind of simple. So we cut Trey Flowers. We saved about $10 million. Yeah, the dead cap is not ideal, but at the same time, it kind of opens us up going forward. We're going to have to eat it this year, but in 2023, 2024, luckily we don't have to worry about that anymore. So I cut Trey Flowers to save pretty good amount of cap, and it did help us out with some of these free agent signings. So let's take a look at those signings now. Starting off with Josh Reynolds first. This was a re-signing. I brought him in on a 2-year deal. Josh Reynolds, not a very expensive contract, basically 2 years, $4 million. This was not a projection according to Pro Football Focus, so I had to do this one myself. And that was the case with a lot of re-signings. You know, that's something that I aim to do, is re-sign a lot of these players. So with Josh Reynolds, I just went 2 years, $4 million with half of that guaranteed. Wasn't sure exactly what the contract could be. Some people believe it'll be like a league minimum deal, way cheaper than that. But I went with a pretty cheap $2 million cap hit for this season, 2 years, $4 million for Josh Reynolds. I'm cool with doing a 1-year deal as well. But after diving into guys like Michael Gallup, watching film on some of these big name receivers, because I was like, man, is there a guy that I'm willing to go spend some money, figure out the financials, and get a splash in free agency? We did the Christian Kirk video, and I just really wasn't blown away. Maybe I got to continue to dive into this position. I dove into it pretty heavy, but I could probably dive into it even more. And I know the Lions want to bring receiver into free agency. That could be an outside option. That could be a re-signing. But after watching Josh Reynolds back and then comparing him to a guy like Michael Gallup straight up, I was like, yeah, Gallup has the name, but I would be a fool not to bring back Josh Reynolds. I mean, the price differential won, but Reynolds was pretty darn productive for us. Really didn't dip in terms of production once St. Brown started doing his thing, so he was still effective for us. Helped us a ton as an ex-receiver. He's a former draft pick where Brad Holmes was with the LA Rams. Good size. He's our typical ex-receiver, so even if he doesn't end up being a starter because of what we do in the draft or the rest of free agency, it's okay. It's not a super expensive deal, but at the very least, you know what you're going to get. Very reliable weapon, and he and Goff, the chemistry hit right away, and you need to have depth is what we saw last season. So I thought I'd be a fool not to bring back Josh Reynolds, especially after going back and watching the film when he came to Detroit. I was like, wow, he's nice, man. He really is. Like, I get he doesn't have the big name. After what he did last year, keeping his price tag low and cheap is what a lot of people are expecting to be the case after looking around at different sites. I had to bring back Josh Reynolds. Hi, it's me from the future, and I just want to point out with this that we made an adjustment. We are cutting Jayshon Cornell because I ended up going with Bruce Hector instead. You could go with either one. We end up cutting Jayshon Cornell. You could cut either one to save some cap space, and we're re-signing Khalif Raymond. I didn't have that on here, but we are re-signing Khalif Raymond. But I did want to point out the stats. So I'm looking through these free agent receivers, and I'm just like, man, I'm not super impressed. And then I see this stat. I saw this today, and it blew my mind. The statistics blew my mind, but at the same time, I can't say I'm surprised after watching some of these big name receivers that hit the market. Listen to this. Since 2018, there's been 32 receivers that have signed a contract worth of $8 million or more, all right? $8 million or more value contract. Their average production has been 41 receptions, 503 yards, and 3 touchdowns. That is a worse stat line than Khalif Raymond put up last season. Kenny Golladay, who was hurt a lot last year, but he was a huge signing. Nelson Aguilar, Kendrick Bourne. Like, there's a reason guys are free agents. This is what we talked about. We talked about the Rams being a trade. There's usually a reason a guy is a free agent. And with this being the case, man, it's concerning. It really is. Like, it's super concerning when you're looking at this. That is a massive concern in terms of chart. We may have to dive into this more on just his own video. Next up, we have Cornelius Lucas. Okay, here I thought outside the box a little bit. Usually when we do these mock drafts, I draft an offensive tackle. Now, I did this before the draft, so keep that in mind. All these signings are before the draft, so I didn't know who I was going to draft. I could try to keep it realistic that way. But before the draft, I decided to sign Cornelius Lucas. Now, according to Pro Football Focus, they were projecting a 2-year, $5 million deal for the backup swing tackle, most recently with the Washington now Commanders. Look, Cornelius Lucas is a very underrated piece recently. He actually was a Lions draft pick back in 2014, but this tackle can play on both sides. He can sub and be your swing tackle if you need him. I think he played over 600 snaps last year, and he was really darn solid as a tackle. So I brought him in on that projected contract that PFF was giving him to be that swing tackle for us, right? And now this can open up the door. Matt Nelson can come back. He can compete on the practice squad. We could still draft someone if there's someone that I do fall in love with in the draft. We'll see that in a second. However, I thought this is something I have to do. I mean, the production really dipped offensively, and we really were hurt when we missed Taylor Decker. For some reason, Sewell or Taylor Decker were not available, and that's what Lucas was with the signing. Not a super expensive deal, but I do like it. You know, you bring in a very proven offensive tackle that can absolutely fit into that swing tackle role and play at a high level when you need him to. I thought it made a lot of sense. I mean, this isn't a long-term solution, but we have our starters. And if you think about the backup positions now, add Cornelius Lucas. We're going to get to Evan Brown in a second. You have Tommy Kramer, right? Logan Stenberg competing. Your offensive line is seemingly complete. I mean, what else do you need to add, right? We could talk about the starters. Yeah, it's great. But what happens when you miss someone, right? And we saw last year it was super impactful. We talk about it all the time. the best way to get success out of Goff is to protect him, so I made sure that was something that I prioritized even in free agency this time. Next up, we have Jalen Reese-Maybin, who I brought in on a 2-year $5.5 million deal. The guaranteed salary here is not huge. This one was also not according to Pro Football Focus, so I had to do this myself. I bumped his contract up a little bit. The way I did this is I bumped it up a little bit from what the Lions brought him in last year on his 1-year deal for. I believe it was like $2.3 million. So I bumped it up to about $2.75 million in terms of cap hit, and I brought him back for 2 more seasons. Jalen Reese-Maybin, Aaron said it, if he is brought back, he's going to have an opportunity to compete for the starting linebacker position. So with that in mind, him still being young, you can see 27 years old, the big role that he played for us, we already know what he is on special teams. Still not an expensive deal, and I think that's a fair range to kind of put him in. I did bump it up a little bit. I think it's a fair range, and as you can see, these first 3 contracts I kept really simple. I didn't backload any of these. I just kept it straight up. So Jalen Reese-Maybin is back as well to at least give us some linebacker depth and compete for a starting role, because if you're going to rely on draft, you don't want to rely on draft picks, right? That's one thing, is you can plug these holes. So this is a way I can plug a hole. If I draft a linebacker, maybe he's not ready and I thought he might be, it's okay, I have Jalen Reese-Maybin. That brings me on to Evan Brown. Now Evan Brown, brought him back as well. Didn't know where to go with the cap number here either. Again, I moved it up from what he was getting paid last year, which was not much at all, to a $1.3 million cap hit. Brought him back as well on a 2-year deal really well, and there was a huge gap you saw between him and Ryan McCollum when having to play center. You got to have depth, especially now with all this COVID and always injuries, but COVID now, you have to have depth, especially on our O-line. It's just that important. I mean, the trenches are so important, not just because Dan Campbell talks about it, just because the production drop-off when we missed certain guys this past year on our offensive line. If we can, there's no reason we don't bring these guys back. There's no reason we miss out. Hopefully no other team is looking at Evan Brown and saying, whoa, hold up, you see what he did in Detroit? Hopefully they overlook him and we can get him back on a relatively cheap deal like this, and that's what I did with the 2-year contract. Moves me on to Jack Fox. He was an exclusive rights free agent, so very cheap. Brought him back for another year on an $895K cap hit. Same thing happened with Brock Wright, $825K cap hit. Both of them were exclusive rights free agents. Thought Brock Wright played well enough last year to come back for sure and have a chance to compete to be the number 2 tight end. Thought he improved. We didn't use him a ton in the pass game. He did make some plays though in the pass game. We know what he was as a blocker. So I think he did enough to definitely get that $825K cap deal without having all these, guarantees on it, because he's an exclusive rights free agent, to at least get him back to compete for a spot. Then you have Tommy Kramer, basically the same thing. Tommy Kramer's being brought back as an exclusive rights free agent. It's nice when they're exclusive rights free agents because it's super cheap and they're brought back on these extremely cheap deals. $825K for Tommy Kramer, who I was impressed with. I was impressed because I thought he got better as the season went on. When we saw him a few times last year, and I thought with Tommy Kramer, when we first saw him, it was like, ooh, that's a little rough. But every time we saw him, I thought he got better. He also proved he could play both guard positions. As young as he is at 24 years old, last year was a rookie season for him. It's easy to forget that because he wasn't a draft pick. Tommy Kramer, no brainer. Bring him back. He may end up being my backup guard. We'll see. Either way, I had to do it for sure on that price tag. Same thing with Scott Daler, a long snapper, brought him back as an exclusive rights free agent, $825K. Mark Gilbert, same thing here when we get to the final 53-man roster. But before I got into the draft, Mark Gilbert was someone that did get to play a little bit. We saw him in the Pittsburgh Steelers game where he was burnt, then he came back, then he stripped it. The Lions gave him some opportunities. They kept him around once they brought him in. So I think the Lions like Mark Gilbert. And with just the talent that we have with our defensive backs coach, I look at the guys that earned opportunities, and I like those guys because I feel like the Lions like those guys. So for, again, Mark Gilbert, very cheap, bring him back. Doesn't work out, okay, we'll cut him. He doesn't get a spot, it's fine. You can cut him, you can try to put him on a practice squad. You can do those things. But to bring him back on an $825K cap number with no guarantees, I have to do that. I absolutely have to do that. I have to. Next up, we have DeAndre Houston-Carton. All right, here we go outside the box a little bit. We're bringing in a safety coming from the Chicago Bears, Houston Carson. He's 29 years old. To me, this kind of feels like a Dean Marlowe type of signing that we made here. Again, I made this before the draft, so keep that in mind. I didn't know how the draft was going to go. I didn't want to force draft picks, I didn't want to be in that mode. We talked about it all the time where I'm drafting needs. That's what I did with Houston Carson. Big factor was Will Harris. Will Harris, he could come back and play safety again next year, be a rotational guy there. That's cool. But Lions moving him to corner, I think it'd be best for his development if they just said, okay, this is what you are, and we're going to keep you here. Now, as you can see on the bottom right, Bobby Price. I didn't bring him back. He's another guy that could kind of fall in that same boat too, though. Just let him stick at that position then. But he'll always have that versatility with Will Harris. So I brought in Houston Carson, a guy that I think will fit into this scheme really well, could play split coverage, but he's also a guy that has background of coming down, covering tight ends, running backs. And he also was coming off his most productive season last year with the Chicago Bears, where he graded out pretty well, but most productive season in terms of snaps with Chicago. He's always been beneficial on special teams. He beat out Deion Bush in 2020 for the backup rotational safety role. So I thought this was a cheap deal. Bring him in. That was according to Pro Football Focus. Brought him in, and we get a nice little depth piece at safety. Next up, we have Matt Nelson. You guys know I got on Matt Nelson a lot last year. Well, I did sign Cornelius Lucas for a reason, because I want a guy I know that can give me some good production if I need to put him in there. Matt Nelson didn't necessarily prove that in the games that we saw him, but I did think it was fair to bring him back and at least let him possibly get some competition throughout the offseason, see if he can improve into the role, because he was good when he played as the 6th offensive lineman. It was asking him to go in and start at tackle is where we had issues. With Matt Nelson, he could continue to improve this offseason, and maybe he earns a spot. I didn't want to just let him go. Did not want to just let him go. So it's like, you know what? I'll bring him back. I'll let him compete, and maybe he continues to improve, and maybe he takes that role, and he's like, I'm the backup tackle. Don't have enough confidence in that to the point where I wasn't going to address it, but I'm okay with bringing him back. So Matt Nelson's back on a very cheap deal. He was also an exclusive rights free agent, $895K. Jesse Lemonnier, same thing, $895K cap hit. He's an exclusive rights deal. I think the Lions started to like Jesse a little bit. You know, we started to see him get involved. We brought him in very early back last season, and we saw him in the last game against Green Bay. He got a sack in that game, made some plays back in the preseason, I think from the LA Chargers, if I'm not mistaken. And the Lions brought him in, and he got his opportunity late into the season. So I brought him back again for competition at the outside linebacker spot for next season. Charles Harris. Okay, now here's a big re-signing. So PFF projected Charles Harris to get a 3-year, $27 million deal, which is kind of expensive. I had to adjust it a little bit. As you can see, his cap number is only $6 million, so I did backload a little bit with this contract. You could also add a void year, but I did backload just a tad. Not a huge amount. Like the Lions, you know, we had the J.C. Cabinda signing. They backloaded that one a little bit, so I backloaded the deal a little bit with Charles Harris to make sure I was able to get him back. I didn't see not bringing him back if I had the opportunity to do it without, you know, really hurting the Lions' future. So I was like, you know, I'm going to bring him back. I'm going to find a way to do it on that projected deal. And man, like, we need pass rush. We do. So you had a guy that played that well in this defense with literally basically no help around him. I mean, he was the focal point. It wasn't Trey or Romeo. He was the focal point of our defense. Even when Trey was healthy. I mean, he was the guy defensively, and he had his best season. He had his breakout year, so maybe his contract's cheaper than that, but again, I had to stick with PFF here, so I brought him back. I would hope that I could get a little bit cheaper than that in real life, but according to Pro Football Focus, that's what they're projecting. Pass rushers are always going to get paid. And again, this is before the draft, so I don't know how the draft is going to roll out. I don't know who I'm going to get. I don't know if I'm going to get a great trade back and I don't end up with Aiden or Kayvon. So I brought back the pass rusher just to know I have it. We need pass rush, so I don't want to lose that. Plus, where he really impressed me was run defense. Everybody thinks to knock his run defense. You know, oh, well, Charles Harris, he's a pass rusher. But I was actually much more impressed with his run defense really than anything last year. Tracy Walker. This one was easy for me. PFF projected him to get a 2-year, $9 million deal. So, of course, I had to give him that. That's a heck of a deal for us. I mean, 2 years, $9 million. Really? That's it? Okay, for sure, I'll do that. Only thing I would change here is I would lock him up for an extra year. Like, I would have just put another year on it, honestly, at that point. If it's 2 years, $9 million, shoot, I'll make it 3 years. What would that be? 3 years? I don't know, like $13 million, something like that. I would do that. I would lock him up 3 years, $13.5 million. Let's do it, Tracy. I really couldn't see doing this without bringing back Tracy Walker. I really started to become a big fan of Tracy as the year went on. I thought he improved big time. We know what he is as a hitter. He improved so much playing in the split coverage safety looks rather than playing in the box all the time. He isn't great in coverage on tight ends or running backs and straight up man coverage, but he is a guy that he's had left some opportunities out there in terms of possibilities making interceptions, but he did improve, and you saw him getting in passing lanes, and we know what he is as a hitter coming downhill. So on that type of deal, probably because the production that he didn't put up, absolutely. Tim Boyle. All right. I can already see. I can see it. Don't start typing. Don't dislike. I know what you're thinking. Oh my God, you dropped back Tim Boyle. What are you thinking? Okay, I did bring back Tim Boyle, but hear me out. Hear me out. This was more of a prediction than anything. I just have a weird feeling the Lions are bringing back Tim Boyle, and I'm not gonna lie with you. The first thing I did was I let Tim Boyle walk, and I signed Colt McCoy because according to PFF, they're projecting he gets like a $1.5 million deal. So I signed Colt McCoy to a 1-year deal. And then I thought about it for a little bit, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go with my prediction side. 1 year. Basically, I gave him the same contract he had last season. I don't think he really improved the amount of money that he should get paid after last year. I think the Lions like him, and we heard Anthony Lynn talk about him. He's younger than Colt McCoy. McCoy's like 35 years old, so that would just be straight up a veteran backup, which is cool. I got no issue with that. But I think the Lions like him. Okay, the cap's a little bit more expensive, but to give him another shot to at least compete for the backup position. That doesn't mean he's won it, but to compete for that spot, I went with Boyle over McCoy. I didn't want to go out and shell like a 2-3 year deal for like $20 million for a backup quarterback, so I want to stay cheap here. So McCoy was the first thing I did because he's done well when he's had to step in with Arizona recently. But I went with Tim Boyle, more of a predictive side, because I think the Lions, I think they're going to end up bringing Tim Boyle back. We'll see. Who knows, though. Next up, I have Jordan Whitehead. We did the video on Jordan Whitehead, so I ended up signing him here to this 3-year, $18 million deal. He could play kind of like that Von Bell type of role with the Cincinnati defense. We saw the Saints, they had Von Bell first. What I like is that, yeah, I mean, you may look at him and just be like, well, he's a box safety. He fits the Patriots and things like that, and he wouldn't fit the Lions defense. But I don't believe that. First off, the Lions played a lot of cover 3 early in the year, so that's a very important note. With Okudah, with Amani, they were pretty cover 3 heavy. But secondly, what's important here is that Whitehead thrives in a couple of areas where I think he could really mesh well with a guy like Tracy Walker. First off, the leadership, just the heart. I mean, he brings that intensity level to a defense. I mean, he is like the heartbeat of a defense. He was the heartbeat of that Tampa Bay defense last year that was huge in their playoff game against Philly. We did the video on him. He's a monster hitter. He does have some injuries that show up here and there because of the play style he plays with, and he is a little bit on the smaller side. He does have some experience playing in split coverage looks. He has at times been single high. A lot of his snaps do come down low. He can cover tight ends really well, and he's been improving every year in that category. He is phenomenal in cover 3. He's played it a lot, and he's awesome playing downhill. So I thought he could mesh well, and what this gives me is not, I guess you could call it kind of like a bridge, right? You get a bridge safety option. I mean, he's young enough where he could be part of your future going forward, no issues with it, but at the same time, he could also be a bridge. That way I'm not drafting a safety this year and saying, well, I got to trust you to be my starter. You know what I mean? I don't want to put that necessarily on a rookie. If he's ready, he's ready. But if he's not ready, I don't want to have to put that on him. And what also is the redeeming quality about Whitehead is that even in a scenario where, let's say we draft somebody and that safety comes in and he's dominant and he and Tracy Walker mesh so well and you're like, all right, dang, he can't be a starter, but we already paid him. At worst, he can still play on sub-package downs. That was one of his roles at one point with Tampa Bay. They go 3 safety sets, and he'd stay in as a sub-package linebacker. So he could still find a way onto the field. I'm sure he gives you a special teams ability as well. And then after that, you'd probably just have to let him go. You know, I mean, if the guy took over his role, you'd probably have to find a trade or cut him or something. When you take a look at the guaranteed money, it was a little over $10 million. I think it was pushing like $11 million. So that was kind of expensive. But again, I had to use theirs. I think it'd be cool I think it'd be okay to give Jordan Whitehead a 2-year deal rather than the 3-year deal that they're projecting. They projected a 3-year, $18 million deal. I think it'd be cool to give him 2 years. That way he's more that bridge option. But I went with what PFF said. But that doesn't matter too much. Jordan Whitehead's on the team for safety. We need safety help, and I think he could pair well together with Tracy. Allow Tracy to be what he's good at. Next up, Josh Woods. It was literally a signing today, so I had to bring back Josh Woods. I don't know what his contract's going to be, so I just kind of did it what it said it was going to be, which was $965K. I don't know. Maybe it's more than that. I could see it being in that range. That would be a little bit of a bump up from last year when he was getting paid with Chicago when he came here. Maybe it pushes a little over $1 million. I mean, you could mess with that a little bit. We have extra cap space, as you can see at the top, to make that work. But Josh Woods was signed today, so Josh Woods is on the team. That's why that is like it is. Same thing with Jason Cabinda. Cabinda is also on the team for that same reason. And now Godwin Igwebuike. So I did bring the running back, again, just for competition. He's an exclusive rights free agent. There's really no guaranteed money. $895K. A little bit, again, more on the predictive side. I didn't like all the fumbles last year. Didn't know how the draft was going to go, if I was going to land a running back or not. So I was like, okay, I'll bring him back. Cheap deal. And he'll at least have an opportunity to compete because, again, that's another guy I think the Lions do like. They gave him a lot of touches. And look, his yards per carry were super high. He had the highest yards per carry on the team. I think he averaged over 6 yards a pop. And he's got a lot of speed. The fumbles just got to clean up big time. He just needs a lot of work this offseason now that he knows that he's no longer a safety. You are now a running back. This could do wonders for him to have a full offseason of that. So I brought Godwin back. So that is the free agency moves that we made. So now let's move over to the draft side of things. And this is where things got kind of crazy, but at the same time, it was pretty darn exciting. So we started off with 10 picks coming into this, and we ended with 10 picks. But they were definitely not in the same order as I moved around the board like crazy. I was not afraid to move the board, as Brad Holmes will put it. I traded up, up, I traded down. At one point, I traded for future picks that ended up putting back into this year's draft. So yes, we are able to trade now on the draft network. Every time you do these mock drafts, it ends up different, especially now with the trades. It always ends up different. So we just had to make it work. You know, whatever happened, happened. That was kind of my goal heading into it. It's like, okay, we'll do the draft, and then whatever happens, I got to adjust to the board. And that's what we did. So we had a lot of fun with it. My goal coming into the draft was that I was going to be able to chase players that I loved rather than chase needs. I didn't want to have to chase needs. Really, aside from receiver, that was the case. Kind of had to chase receiver a little bit. I wanted to draft some receivers anyway. As of right now, I do like how this draft played out, and then we'll touch on UDFAs afterwards. Guys I could have targeted instead. We'll go through the trades and all of that stuff. So let's dive right into it. Let's waste no time. Let's go. Let's start off with the second pick in the draft. So this was a spot I did not get a trade offer. Well, I may have gotten a trade offer. I don't know for sure, though. I can't remember. I don't think I did. But if it was probably from like the Jets or the Giants. And I personally didn't really want to move back to 4 or 5. I didn't want to move back past 4. That was not something I wanted to do. Kyle Hamilton or Aiden Hutchinson is where I like to go with this pick. And I'm Aiden Hutchinson. I'm on that bandwagon of Aiden Hutchinson. I think he's maybe the best player in this draft, or the best defensive player at least. So I ended up just staying put, drafting Aiden Hutchinson with the second pick in this year's draft. I don't think there needs to be a ton of explanation for this. We all know about Aiden Hutchinson. I think he's going to improve every single year. We know he's from Michigan, but that doesn't really mean anything. I mean, when it comes to the Lions, I don't care where the dude's from. I really don't. You know, I don't care what school they're from. I just want the best players for the Lions. But for Hutchinson, I think he is super talented. He's going to give us a lot of pass rush help. He fits so much better in that 3-4 outside linebacker scheme. It's what he actually pointed to his breakout this past year, was being able to play in that stand-up role. So I love that. There is some versatility, of course, to slide in on pass downs, move around to different spots, but I love his run defense. Maybe my favorite part of his game is I feel like he is a beast at the outside linebacker position on early downs against the run. So he's the full package. He's a complete package, and that's why we're taking him at number 2. I wanted a game changer defensively, and I think I'm getting that here with Aiden Hutchinson. We need pass rush. He will help us, but he'll also help us in the first place where it starts. It's stopping the run. I think he helps us a ton there as well. So Hutchinson was the second pick in the draft. That moves us on to pick number 32. If I mess some of these up, my bad. But with pick number 32, here is where I did trade back, and I'll throw the trade up on the screen. We ended up trading with the New York Jets. I don't remember. Okay, it does tell you who they selected. So I guess they moved up to take Daxton Hill. That is the trade details. Definitely feel like, you know, I won this trade. I felt like I won every trade, though. That's kind of the mindset you got to have. Like, oh, I won that. I won that. So you can see I had to give up my 6th and 7th round pick. I think I actually adjusted their offer a little bit. They was trying to, you know, play me. That's what they was trying to do. So I was like, okay, hold up. I want your 3rd round pick. I'll throw in the 6th and the 7th because we got 2 6 and 2 7. So I threw those picks in. They accepted the deal, which, by the way, it's not easy on this thing to accept deals, okay? I try to test it out. Trust me, I tried to. Like, maybe this thing's broken and I can finesse it. It's definitely not broken, all right? First thing, you can't trade one pick for one pick. Second thing is that teams that literally don't need to trade up will not trade up. They won't. They'll have no interest whatsoever. So if there's not a player and there's a reason for them to move up, they won't do it. And it's not easy to make trades on here, okay? I'm not going to say it's difficult, but it's not easy either. It's definitely not broken like, you know, the PFF one's kind of broken, or at least it was last time I used it. So this is the first trade that I made, and as you can see, we moved back from the 32 spot. Drake London was gone at this spot. I was hoping to land London. I know, you know, every time it's different. Sometimes he goes earlier. I've seen him go to Tennessee. I've seen him go to the Dolphins. I could see doing it. Like, I would have no issue if the Lions tried to trade up and grab Drake London, but I think he went much earlier than I expected, like pretty darn early. So I was like, okay, I got no shot. So I ended up trading back when I got to my second pick in the draft, which was pick number 32. Has a lot of value. I added a 3rd round pick at Hill, Chris Paul, and Jashawn Corbin. I'll get to that in a second. Let's start with my second pick then, which was pick number 34 in this draft. So 34 is a Detroit Lions pick. It's the second pick in the second round. And with that pick, I selected receiver David Bell. I think I was either him or Jahan Dotson were the top receivers according to this board left. And of course, there was other guys like Christian Watson in there. And, you know, there's guys like that. But I went with David Bell. I mixed it up a little bit. I want to do a video on David Bell at some point because it's kind of frustrating watching some of his film because there are some games where they just do not throw him to football. It is a very hard to watch offense at times, really tough with the quarterback play, and it's just sometimes like, man, you guys got to utilize this guy better. With this talent, you got to utilize him much better than you are. I've been diving into his film a lot more recently, so we'll have to do a video on him soon, but there are a couple things that stick out. He's about 6'2", 205 pounds, so he has some pretty nice size. He slots in as like your typical X receiver, so he could take that Josh Reynolds role. But what's nice, man, is he is so fluid. That's the way that I would say it, smooth, fluid. Kind of reminds me of a Devontae Smith when he came out, just in terms of route running. It is just such a fluid route runner. It's so smooth. It's so pretty to watch. His ability to make multiple cuts, double moves, and he's got every single little add of nuance you could ask for, from head fakes, turning his hips. He does all the little things, and he sells it so well. He rarely has to change speed. He doesn't give any tells when he's making his cuts. He is such a smooth route runner for that position. But he has a couple of traits that I like for that position as well. First off, he's not afraid to take a big hit. He has taken some monster hits, especially over the middle of the field, but he's gotten right back up and he's held onto the football. Very nice, seemingly reliable pass catcher. From what I've seen, he is a very snaggy type of receiver. Like, you throw it near him, it's just pluck, pluck, pluck. He just constantly gets open against man coverage, especially in the short to intermediate range. Those corner routes that we ran last season, some of the double, like, he's going to be a killer at that position. There is some knockback because he doesn't have elite speed. He doesn't even have great speed. I would say it's just good speed. So there are some limitations there to getting a ton of separation on just like go balls or, double moves. There's not a huge threat there. Also, after the catch, he's not scary, but at the same time, he's had great moments, especially against teams like Iowa, I think Wisconsin. He's a little shifty. He's a little shifty, but he's not necessarily scary with the ball in his hands. Looks like he's going to be your typical X, but definitely could play off the line of scrimmage as well. And when you watch him, is that when he is pressed, he does nice little stutter to get some separation. If he had better quarterback play, if he had a better offensive system for him, he could have thrived much more. I could see the fit here. Gives me some Josh Reynolds vibes, but just the quick play action game, the intermediate routes, the route running. You're going to be able to trust things to be on time with him. That's the biggest thing, is that on time routes, he's going to be money, it feels like, and he's got very reliable hands. Anything that's thrown his range. What I really liked, I'm going to be honest, is I never really saw him like put his head down and pout or get mad when certain games there was huge stretches of the ball not being thrown his way just because their offense, it was tough to watch, but there was never pouting. Like, he just kept going. And that moves you on to that 35th pick, which is with the Jets trade. Oh, it's me from the future again. And I do want to point out with this pick, this was the toughest decision I made in the entire mock offseason, was to select David Bell here. And really, I'm still kind of arguing with myself whether or not this is the right decision. I still need to dive into more of his film to be completely sure about this one. But of course, it's still early. We're still not to the draft yet, so opinions will change. But I've been going back and forth on whether or not this should be David Bell or Christian Watson at this spot. Should I have taken Christian Watson here? Because I think you could easily interchange it, get Christian Watson a little more speed, a bigger body, a little scarier after the catch, maybe a little bit less polished, not the same type of production. I think you could go that direction as well. I just wanted to point that out. I'm not going to continue to bring this up throughout the video, but it's something that I did want to point out. It's been, kind of just hitting me like, oh, should I went with Christian Watson instead of David Bell? So I just wanted to let you guys know, just to get off my chest, that I've been struggling with that. But I'm going with David Bell in this scenario, but this definitely could have been Christian Watson, and the rest of the draft would have stayed the same. You could have took him at that spot. Some people may say it's early, but I think he's going to start flying up boards by the time we hit draft day. And by the time we hit draft day, I projected, I think he'll probably be around 2 picks. So just because of his physical tools. So that's something I've been struggling with, but I did want to just share it with you guys just to let you know, okay, that I've been battling with myself on this one. But we've already done the entire mock offseason, so I don't want to change it. And I do like David Bell. I'm going to continue to dive into more of his film now because I pretty much got a good feel on who Christian Watson is and what he brings to the table. So I'll continue to watch a guy like David Bell. Just wanted to throw it out there, get off my chest. I feel better now. Enjoy the rest of the video. That is edge rusher Logan Hall. At least they list him as edge. I don't see him as an edge. I know he played edge, and he's one of these dudes that are 6'6". He's bulked up in his time being at Houston. He's now pushing like 270, 280, starting off at about 220. He's putting on a lot of pounds. Definitely could continue to add to that frame. He's been a guy that I picked up really early in the draft process that I really liked, and I'm still sticking with that. He was at the Senior Bowl. Wasn't a dominant Senior Bowl performance, but you saw some plays in there from him. A couple things stuck out. Of course, he's really nice with his swim move. When you watch his film, man, his leverage, his ability to stay low off the snap at that size sticks out. He's got an extremely impressive first step, and he has a counter to set up off of that, which is a lot of times that swim move using his height over top. Big issue there is that, when he does get over top, if he doesn't get around, sometimes he can get kind of walled back up because then he's too tall. Also afford probably to add a little bit more to his frame. Didn't play the best competition at Houston, but still somehow he was super dominant playing the 3-tech. I mean, he was so dominant there, and I'm talking against double teams, against the run. He was dominant from the 3-tech at 270 pounds. I mean, he's built like a big edge rusher. So a couple traits about his game that I like that I think the Lions will as well. First one being the length. That's extremely important, especially if you're going to be asked to play anytime over a tackle. You need to have that length, especially against zone runs. But his length is a very big problem, especially as a pass rusher. He can get a lot of space space between him and an offensive lineman, which can help him set up a bull rush, and he's able to get nice bend and get low, and he can reset during the play to get a push back. But then you also see really nice feet. He has really nice feet. He's able to set up a lot of his overhand swim moves with a nice little jab step early into play to get an offensive line leaning. Nice side-to-side movement where he can work on stunts from inside to outside. I didn't think he was great working straight up against tackles because he didn't have that kind of speed, that burst off the edge. He doesn't have that, but you put him on the interior with his length and his movement skills, he's an absolute nightmare for some of those interior offensive linemen. Early downs, I definitely think he could play over a tackle, play a 4-eye, play a 5 technique. I think he could do that because of his length. He would just have to put on some more pounds, but he'd be fine against zone runs and things like that because of his movement ability. I just don't see as much pass rushing upside there as I do when he was on the interior. When he was on the interior, he gave a lot of guys problems rushing from the 3 tech. So it'll be something the Lions would have to make a decision on if they wanted to go with a guy like this. Are they cool with maybe asking him to bulk up a little bit? Because I definitely think with his frame, he could do it for sure. And he plays with a great motor, very relentless. I think the Lions could ask him to put on some more pounds, add to his frame, and fit in on your defensive line. He's just going to give you a very awesome rotational player that if he doesn't have to come in and be a starter and he can just develop, I just see such a high ceiling with him. I just see such a high ceiling because I think there's so much he can add to what he already is physically, and he could get so scary. He could really be scary at the next level. So I went with Logan Hall, got a fierce pass rusher in my opinion, the 6'6", 270 pound. They list him as edge. I'm going to call him a defensive lineman out of Houston. That moves us on to our next pick, and that is pick number 66. This is a current Lions draft pick, and we selected linebacker Chad Muma. I know I've been taking Chad Muma a lot, and I wasn't trying to draft the same players. There's just certain guys that I really like, and I didn't draft the same players. You'll see when we get to a couple of these later picks, but Chad Muma is a guy that I'm just a huge fan of, and I know he's working his way up some of these draft boards, but he was there at 66, and I was just like, how can I not take him? I think at 34 and 35, I had an option to take some linebackers, but I like the David Bell idea. Big fan of Logan Hall, so I took both those guys having back-to-back picks. I was like, oh, I'm hyped about this. Needing a linebacker still, and what we did in free agency, we didn't really go get a linebacker. We kind of just re-signed guys. Chad Muma, I think, is a plug-in-and-play, led the nation in tackles. He could absolutely drop into coverage. I mean, he is fun to watch. Good sideline-to-sideline speed. Plus, he's a type 1, just like me, so, you know, that's pretty cool as well. He's 6'3", 240 pounds. He's got good speed. He has such great instincts versus the run. I mean, he picks on these things so fast. Constantly the first one to the football. And in pass coverage, not great, but definitely a good pass coverage guy that can definitely drop into zone coverage. Man coverage, he had the speed to do it, turn and run with guys. I think some shifty players could give him some issues. We did a full video on it, but yes, can bring that zone coverage element, which we're kind of losing with Alex Anzalone. Held the Mike linebacker position down back in college, but I think there's versatility to play, you know, both spots. I was super hyped about the pick again. Like, I loved it. That moves us on to pick number 83. Now, this one did come through a trade, so let's take a look at the trade details. This is a trade with the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's see why they did this. So, the Philadelphia Eagles moved up. So, I had pick number 69, which I acquired from the Jets because, you know, I wanted that third-round pick. So, I had that pick. I get to the spot, and I'm like, okay, there's certain players that I was looking at heavy, and there was no one there that I wanted to take. So, like, all right, I can afford to trade back. And Philadelphia Eagles came around, and as you could see, they traded up to that spot, and I guess they got Travis Jones, which, you know, you look at that D-line, that was the staple of that team when they went and won the Super Bowl with Fletcher Cox and guys like that. So I guess it makes sense. And Travis Jones is an absolute problem. He really is. Like, okay, there's a couple of dudes in this draft that, man, if we didn't have a nose tackle, we could be okay because Travis Jones is awesome. I like Travis Jones a lot. I'm just a little bit concerned about the scheme fit, but Travis Jones is awesome. I don't know how much versatility he has outside of a one tech, but he's really fun to watch, and he did really well at the Senior Bowl. And, you know, of course, you have the big man out of Georgia. If he ended up in return getting their 83rd pick, also their 4th round pick, and I wanted to get that 7th round 2022 draft pick. I like grabbing the 7th in the future because I can just have those. So just a little bit of extra ammunition that I can throw back if I ever want to try to jump back into the draft. So with this, I think I got a pretty nice return, and I ended up at pick number 83 because I didn't think he'd be here. You know, I didn't know who was going to be there. I didn't think Mathis was going to be sitting there, the defensive lineman out of Bama. So, yeah, I know my first round, it's a lot of frontline guys. You know, it is. It's a lot of front 7 pieces, 2 edges, or I call it a defensive lineman and an edge, a linebacker, and then another defensive lineman, and Mathis here. But I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it, right? I want to take guys that I was very excited about, and Mathis D-line is looking really tough right now, like just straight up. I mean, just think about this. Just picture this in your head, because this is what the Rams and where Bad Holmes is coming from, this is what this team was built around, is just a disgusting defensive line, and everything else improved. Sometimes you didn't know who the linebackers or corners or safeties were, but their defense line every year was so scary dominant. Lions started that last year, and I'm adding on to it. Logan Hall gives me a scary pass rusher. Now I add Mathis, and Mathis is cool because I think he brings some of the elements, not to the level of Logan Hall. Like, Logan Hall feels like a really nice fit for the Lions because of his length, his get off, but he brings some of that. Pretty good length for Mathis. So that's the first thing that sticks out here. Can two gap, can one gap, can do both, which could be important. The Lions were trying to build a wall at times last season. So if you're going to have to two gap and play those responsibilities to be able to, hold your own, you have to be able to have a good base. And he could do that, but he has a very strong upper body, and it's a lot of work that he does with his hands. Good length, but he's got really nice hands, and it shows off as a pass rusher, but also in run defense. He's got a really killer swim move that can disengage and get him in the backfield making plays. But on top of that, you'll see other things mixed in there. You get the club, you get the rip moves, as a pass rusher. So he's got a little bit to his bag there, a little bit to his arsenal. He's not like super raw. The guy who just had like 7 sacks. You can't be raw at that size to be able to do what he did. But I also think he is a nice fit for asking him to shoot gaps. And we'll have to see what the Lions do exactly next season. But he can get downhill, and that seems like he's going to be most effective there, because his biggest concern for me is probably the lateral mobility, especially on zone runs, because he can be a little bit tough trying to move side to side, and change directions very quickly. It can take a little bit for him to slow down and get back up to speed. Up and down the field, he could be scary. He could be scary working into the backfield. His length, good strength overall in the upper body, and ability to disengage, hold his ground. Mathis was just a cool fit, and I didn't think he'd be here. He never really falls this far for me. So I was like, okay, what I'm going to do? I'm going to be a little greedy with this one. I'm going to take another D lineman. You could argue this pick is maybe a little bit of overkill, but I don't know. I mean, think about that front. Levi, Aleem, Michael Brockers. Hey, Brockers is getting a little older. Who knows how much longer he's got? He's got 2 years left on his deal. He's getting a little older. I'm not saying that one of these guys will take over, but they could. Logan Hall with some development could play that role at some point because he's a phenomenal athlete, put on some weight. Mathis, I think he can play 3-tech and 5-tech, so he'll be able to play both positions for you, but really he's played it all along the defensive line. He can get up right over your center and go to work there. And what's cool about Mathis is he doesn't have to come off on pass downs. He's still effective on pass downs as well. What did the Lions look for? They wanted guys with an explosive first step that could stop the run, but also could have pass rush upside. Both these guys, without question, give you pass rush upside. Next up, we have pick number 97, Lions' original picks again, and this would be the 3rd round. Yeah, this would be the comp pick in the 3rd round, I believe. And I ended up selecting safety Nick Cross out of Maryland. Okay, so we ended up signing Jordan Whitehead, and we have Tracy Walker back. Now let me get a player that could develop into an absolute starter in this league for years to come in Nick Cross. I was just so excited when I started watching him. I actually learned about him going through this, and I've looked at a lot of safeties, but he was fun to watch. He really was. I know 2020 wasn't the best season. He was benched at one point during 2020, but 2021, the film that I watched so far, I'm going to have to watch a lot more of Nick Cross because he was super exciting. Everybody gets so hyped about the versatility that Kyle Hamilton brings. I'm not calling him Kyle Hamilton, but man, he can literally play every spot for you, it seems like, defensively. He lined up at linebacker. He played slot. He played deep safety. He played in the box. He played split coverage. He did it all. A really nice size, 6'1", 215 pounds. I mean, he's a very well-built safety, and he just checks a lot of boxes of things that you're looking for because he's an all-around type of player. Like, he really can touch on every aspect of the game. First off, when you talk about him as a hitter, he will absolutely lay guys out. The biggest thing here is run angles sometimes can be a little too flat, and he can get some questionable angles when working downhill to go make a play on someone. Maryland would bring him. They would bring him downhill to blitz, especially when they left in extra guys to pass protect and he didn't have any responsibilities, and he would bring the pressure. I think he had 3 or 3.5 sacks. Absolutely can get pressure. A lot of that is just how he's built, but at the same time, I mean, he just comes after you when he's working downhill. But then you have to like him in coverage as well. He can handle tight ends. He can handle running backs in man coverage. I think where he really seemed to thrive was working downhill on plays and then come down and make plays, undercut routes, come down, lay a big hit, things like that. Very consistent ball production. He made a lot of plays even in man coverage on the football. He looked pretty comfortable in those spots, but I do think he plays well when things are a little bit more in front of him. But he's versatile. He has range to play as your deep safety. He just needs to trust himself a little bit more. I think he could actually use some work in picking up on, some route recognition, some pattern recognition, and continuously put himself in a good position and be less hesitant at times. Also does flash some really nice plays from the deep safety position. He's just a fun player to watch, and I like the build. I think he's a little bit maybe rougher on the edges, but there's just so much to his game in terms of potential here, and we're hitting the end of round 3, knowing that I already have 2 safeties in place where, okay, those guys can be my starters, but Nick Cross could develop into being a long-term starter. So that's who I drafted out of Maryland. That moves me on to pick number 112. Moves me on to pick number 112. And this pick, again, acquired via a trade. And this was with the Atlanta Falcons. So as you guys can see the trade details there, how it went down. You can see what I gave up. I gave them my 122nd pick. So I basically moved up 10 spots from where I currently was. And watching the draft board and looking at the receivers available, I didn't want to miss out on this guy. I kind of felt like Brad Holmes, you know, when he went up and got Derek Barnes. That's what I kind of felt like. I didn't want to lose on this receiver. I gave up my 122 and then also my 6th round pick, 179. But in return, I feel like I got a really nice return. It's about them 7th round picks. Don't overlook them 7th round picks, as you will see. I don't know who you would say won that deal, but again, I feel like I did because I got the player that I want. You can see they got Mathis and Zach Tom out of Wake Forest. I got receiver Alec Pierce out of Cincinnati. So unfortunately, I was unable to get Christian Watson as he is going so much earlier, according to the Draft Network, which is kind of sad. You know, maybe that's not the case in real life. Maybe he falls a little bit. I was hoping he'd fall because I was like, ooh, that'd be a great pairing. You know, I got David Bell and I got Christian Watson on the other side, that speed to take the top off. I would love that. And what he could do after the catch, that's awesome. Didn't happen. Drake London went way earlier than I thought he would round 1. So didn't happen. So I'm sitting here. I know I got a nice outside receiver, David Bell, at my X, but I wanted another guy. I wanted a guy with a speed threat, a guy that could stretch the field, a guy that gave me some size. And watching the draft board, Alec Pierce felt like that guy that could fill that role. And I didn't feel like I had to give up a ton to make this happen anyway. So I grabbed the receiver out of Cincinnati. 6'3", 215 pounds. He's actually got a pretty good build. And you could see him at the Senior Bowl. I thought he struggled a little bit during one-on-ones. I think for sure he did struggle a little bit in one-on-ones. And I think that's an area where he needs to improve. There also could be some limitations there. I'll have to dive more into the film. But his route running is not great. You know, that's why he's not going to be playing necessarily the X receiver in my vision. Down the road, some people think that would be his spot because, you know, of just some of the build that he has for it. Physical receiver, can easily play through contact. Great high point, takes the top off effortlessly. Outstanding speed. And what's nice about him is, man, he just catches footballs. Like 50-50 balls are usually his ball. I mean, you think of Drake London, we talk about him and how good he is at a jump ball situation. He's also very good in jump ball situations. The biggest knock here for me is being able to create some of that separation, especially being able to dial down in routes and come back, work back to the football. Seems to be the comeback routes that he struggles with, coming back and creating separation. So for me, I'm going to be plugging him in and playing him off the line of scrimmage. That's probably what I'll do. There could be some X versatility here depending on the sets, but then there's also the fact that he played like a big slot with Cincinnati as well, and he gave teams problems attacking the seam. It kind of gives me some vibes of Tyrell Williams in just in terms of how I thought that we were going to use him, being able to play as that guy that can absolutely take the top off, reliable hands, can play with some physicality, but at the same time can also line up in the slot and become a little bit of a matchup problem. He seems built for this kind of offense anyway, so I ended up taking Alec Pierce. Maybe his draft stock falls a little bit after a Senior Bowl performance. Definitely think that's an area that needs work, especially if you're going to ask him to be your X receiver, because he's going to have to be much more refined to get open against man coverage. But for the role I'm looking for him to play right away, I love it. And just that versatility is really cool. We got a lot of versatility in our room. You know, hey, Drake London, I love the idea of it. Versatility, being able to take top off, things like that. But I'm getting that. And I think Alec Pierce might actually have more speed than Drake London. I don't think he does as much after the catch, but I think also some that's just situational. It's the second receiver that I selected via a trade. Take a break from trades for a minute. We have an offensive tackle. This was hard because there was a pretty nice break here. We're now on to round 5. I think this is like the end of round 5. And I wasn't sure where to go with this. I mean, there were really, like I said, I wasn't trying to chase needs. Wasn't sure where to go with it. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to take the player that I really like at this spot. And I went between a couple options. There was a couple tight ends, you know, that I thought of. You know, Bellinger for sure. I thought about it. I'm like, okay, I could put some competition on Hockenson. But I didn't want to do it here. I was like, maybe I'll end up being able to get him a little bit later. And so I didn't take the tight end. I was looking at running back a little bit. Didn't love the running backs. I was like, do I get a third receiver? Definitely could have been the direction you go with instead. I ended up taking the tackle out of Arizona State here. Look, when you get to the end of these rounds, because I've been diving into it very heavy these last couple of days with the tackle position, there are a lot of tackles that, yeah, it's just not great. It's just not great. I'm going to be honest when you're looking in the 7th round for some tackle help. And wasn't that I needed tackle help because I did have Cornelius Lucas coming in, but Kellen is a player that I really do like. And I think, again, he needs some improvement. He needs some work, but I also see him as it can pay off big time, especially with Hank Fraley. He could pay off. I think he needs time to develop. I think he needs to develop his frame. He needs to become a little bit stronger. He just doesn't really have a knockback when he blocks guys, but he was also one of the top pass protectors in Power 5 in the country. country last season. One of the top in the country in terms of pressures and sacks allowed. One of the best at it at Arizona State. Really nice athletic, really nice mobility from an offensive tackle in passing sets. Also can work to the second level with that ability. So he's a guy that I think just needs to build onto his frame, add a little bit more as a guy that could, deliver more of a punch. I think he fits a zone rushing offense, but could add a little bit more punch for some of those power schemes. And I think there's athleticism right now for sure to be your swing tackle. I just think he needs a little bit more added to his game. And at this spot, I think that's okay. So I took Kellen. It was a guy I really liked. I see high upside here for sure. And this is the same spot that Terrell Crosby was selected. So, hey, look, I didn't want to pass on him just because I signed Cornelius Lucas to a cheap deal. So I took him. Takes us to our second to last pick in the draft, which is Aaron Hansford, a linebacker out of A&M. Now, I do look at myself, I'm like, man, maybe I should have took Sewell's brother, because I think that'd be kind of cool. Get Sewell's brother, pair him with Penei Sewell, just like we did with Julian and Romeo. I think that's kind of cool to do that. So if the Lions did it, I would like it. I wouldn't be mad about it. But I do like Aaron Hansford. He is a former receiver, and we're at the 7th round here. There's like 15 picks left. So at this point, you're just hoping for development. And there's some things to like on his game for sure. There's some things to like, especially as a run defender. You can see some of that top end speed that he has as a receiver, as a former receiver. When he gets sideline to sideline, he gets a full head of steam. He can run down some guys. But as a run defender, there's some things to like for sure. He's a pretty patient run defender. What I mean by that is when he breaks down and tackle, he's very patient, works well to square himself up and make a very good, reliable tackle. He did also do some work rushing off the edge. A lot of times they would slide in O'Neal, the safety, and then they would rush him off the edge, and he did some work there. Doesn't seem to have a lot of pass rush moves right now, so maybe that's something they could work on. As I was a really nice communicator, and I had to throw that up with Nick Cross as well. Nick Cross, there was so much communication going on pre-snap. It was actually super impressive. Same thing here with Aaron. Like, he was a leader seemingly of that defense. He got guys in the right spot. When there was confusion, he got guys where they needed to be. I'm looking at him as possibly competing for the backup Mike position, where he could back up a guy like Derek Barnes. I think as a coverage guy, he does a really nice job of reading eyes, and he could set himself up in some really good spots. Man coverage, we'll see. I think some of his change of direction isn't great. One big issue is he stands very tall. You would think as a receiver this would be better, but he stands really tall. He stands straight up. He's only been playing linebacker for a couple of years, so maybe just time there would help him. Side of his game too is that he does have really nice length, which allows him to shed blockers at the second level. So if you're going to be shooting gap and blockers are coming up field, it is nice that he has some length to disengage, and he's not going to be completely walled out of a play. And that moves us on to our final pick, which was acquired by trade. I did this trade just because I thought it'd be kind of fun. So I ended up giving all those 7th round picks, 2022s to 2023, all the 7th round picks that I acquired. I think maybe there's one I didn't give up. Hold up, I got a 2024 here. I actually may have a 2024 7th round pick that I held on to. It looks like I still have one. So hey, it looks like they gave the Lions an extra pick, but I gave up 3 7th round picks to move up to 240 in this draft. I didn't have a pick left, so I got 240, and with the final pick, I selected Verone McKinley III out of Oregon. Verone McKinley, another safety, but I didn't want to be like, well, I can't take a safety because I already signed in one and drafted one. Like, nah, if I like safety, I'm going to do it, and that's what the Rams did one year. They took multiple safeties because they felt like it was a good class, and I liked the safety. He slipped through the cracks. I was like, all right, I'll take him. I'll take a shot on him. I'll take a flyer, and why hold on to these picks? Just to say I had extra picks? We're doing a mock offseason. Let's just use the picks. So I used the picks. I got McKinley out of Oregon. What's cool about him is that he does such a good job at reading route combinations, and he is constantly in positions to make plays on the football. He had 6 interceptions this past year, which led to Pac-12. He had 4 interceptions in 2019, which led to Pac-12. He reads routes rather than necessarily reading eyes. That's what sticks out, and it can put him in positions where he is the first one to the ball and everybody else doesn't know where the ball even is. He could be so fast to get to the football, catching up on routes and where guys are moving and where the play is going towards, rather than relying on just watching the quarterback's eyes. There was some versatility in there. He a lot of times did play back. Range seems to be good, not great. A lot of it's from instincts because he's really constantly getting on the play very fast. Doesn't have great speed though, so that is something to keep an eye on. He's definitely best built for playing at a split coverage look, which can move around post snap like ours. But he did make some plays in the box as well. I saw him blitz, had no sacks, but they would blitz him. He laid a monster hit though on Fresno State's quarterback, and I think he knocked him out. I don't know what happened there. No sacks though, but he did make some plays on the run game. Had some rapid tackles. You can see by the way he tackled, he's not that big, but he's another guy that does a good job of making sure that he hits with his shoulder. The big downside of the way that he plays coverage is that he can be a little bit out of the play sometimes too, because he can read route patterns and it can put him away from the play because he'll kind of read on the combinations of the routes, get to a certain spot, and then the ball goes somewhere else. Hit and miss there, but those kind of interceptions, they speak for themselves. Fantastic ball skills. If you throw a bad pass near him, he's making a play on the ball. 10 interceptions, 6 interceptions last year. You can't deny that. 11 in his career with Oregon in 3 seasons, 6 interceptions. He's a ball hawk, no question. And he's probably going to have some special teams versatility. Don't know if he'd be a gunner. Just like a lot of these later picks, he's going to have to clean some up to just find a way to be more consistent. And I'm sure the physical tools are probably not ideal. 5'11", so under 6 foot, not the biggest guy. Could probably build onto that a little bit more. Maybe not exactly what you're looking for, like a Nick Cross kind of build, but the ball production is there. And I do see an opportunity to compete and possibly, I don't know, surprise some people. Who knows? I mean, he can make his presence felt in the preseason by making some big plays, and the Lions can use guys that can make plays in the back end at any position. So I was like, hey, I'll take a chance on him. I'm not going to leave the picks. Let's just go make it happen. Some of these UDFA possibilities, we have Grant Calcaterra there, a tight end out of SMU. This is a player that I think is much better pass catcher than he was maybe a blocker from what we've seen. He does show some willingness as a blocker. Definitely not his strongest suit, though. I would like to add somebody as a tight end, whether that's through the draft, free agency, or a UDFA in this case, just to compete, because I think Shane Zylstra could be back to compete again next year. Brock Wright will be back, I think, for sure, with T. Jackson. Someone to push him, and I was really considering using that with my fifth round pick instead of the offensive tackle. I didn't get tight end. I did want to mention one possible name for an undrafted free agent signing. So let's just say hypothetically we signed these guys, all right? This tight end, better pass catcher, I think, than run blocker. About 6'4", 250. He has some good size, and he's a pretty nice route runner, which sticks out. He's not really crazy with the ball in his hands, but he could compete with a guy like Shane Zylstra, where if you didn't have Hawkinson for a game or something, maybe he could slide in and, come in and help you with a pass catcher because you're kind of missing that element. So that's the first guy put on here. Also put Chase Garbers, the quarterback out of Cal. Okay, just like Jared Goff, another quarterback out of Cal. Played in a pro-style offense. Seemed to be pretty good in terms of decision-making. Had some good command on that offense. Nothing that really blew you away. But with some of these 7th-round prospects, like when you get to the end, I've went through a lot of them. I don't really like a ton of them on the TDFN draft simulator. So I ended up just putting Chase Garbers on here. We didn't end up drafting a quarterback. We didn't end up signing a backup quarterback that wasn't Tim Boyle. So someone's probably in UDFA should be picked up to at least compete. So I would chase Garbers because I don't think David Blau is going to be back. Someone else could probably put in this mix. Maybe you go kill Glass or something like that. He could just add some arm strength because I think Glass with some more arm strength would be much better. So I put Garbers on there. Landman, the inside linebacker out of Colorado. He was nice. He was making a lot of plays against the run. He was also running over some offensive linemen as well. Like, he made some big plays against the run, showed tons of effort, tons of motor. The issue I have with him is just change of direction. It looked kind of sluggish. Didn't really see him line up in man. That would probably be an issue for him, trying to run with guys in man coverage as well. But maybe some competition for a guy that I think definitely showed a lot of promise as a run defender for the practice squad. Then we have a slot receiver on here. This is out of Texas Tech. He transferred here from Troy. And I think we could use possibly another slot. So this is just some competition. He saw some juice with the ball in his hands. It gives me some like Jalen Darden vibes. When the ball's in his hands, he can be kind of a problem, and he could give you some versatility there. Maybe compete, for a returner position. That's also something he's done in his past as well. And he's been scary. He's had some huge returns back with Troy. So that's a guy that we pick up as a slot receiver for depth to compete. And then Castro Fields. This is a guy I really wanted to draft. Thinking about doing it actually with that Verone McKinley pick, but McKinley was there, so I went with McKinley. The point is, Castro Fields always goes undrafted for some reason on the Draft Network. And if that was the case in real life, I would love to snag him. I think his scheme fit is good. I watched him a little bit at Penn State, and from what I've seen, I do like him. I think he could play that cover 3 role. I think he's highly competitive, and he makes good plays on the football when the ball is in his area. Like, he doesn't make any pass catch easy, and he does have size. He has the size that I think Brad Holmes looks for. The 6'2 plus kind of cornerback. I think he's 6'3", 200 pounds. Castro Fields, the dude, I really like him. I think he'll end up getting drafted, but according to this, he didn't get drafted. So it's like, all right, let's just count him as UDFA. Quarterback, it's Goff and it's Boyle. Look, we didn't draft anybody. We didn't go sign a quarterback. I could have went with a different backup quarterback, but I think the Lions may bring back Tim Boyle, but this could be a different backup. Either way, it looks the same as of right now. Running back looks exactly the same. Swift. Williams is on his last year. I believe Jefferson is going to be an absolute stud. I'm just waiting for him to get his opportunity, and maybe next year that is the case. We had Lomas talk about it. He thought maybe it was either pass protection, which could be the case. That was kind of a little bit of an issue back at Oregon State, or it could be trying to pick up the playbook. Either way, I think Jefferson is still going to be a stud. Craig Reynolds is under contract for next year as well. So we do have 2 guys that are not under contract going forward after this season. They could always just re-sign Craig Reynolds or Jamal Williams for that matter. This was not a position I addressed. In some of my mock drafts I've done, I've been able to land running backs that I like at the end, like Jerion Ely, something like that. And Ely would be like a cool player that I think could be like an undrafted free agent signing, but I honestly didn't know a ton about some of these really late running backs, so I didn't want to put one of these guys on there and say, well, that's a potential UDFA signing, because I didn't know a ton about him, so I didn't want to say that. Maybe someone could slide in and compete for depth. But for this, the final 53-man roster, it's going to stay the same. At tight end, we have Hockenson and Wright. I think Wright would be getting some competition from a UDFA tight end here. Maybe Shane Zylstra. Probably someone else, though. Maybe a Calcaterra, like I said, for a UDFA potential signing. I did really heavily consider taking a tight end with the 5th pick, and if I probably could have, based on needs, I probably could have taken a guy like Bellinger, because I think watching him back, he fits a 2 tight end set. He's a very willing blocker. Like, he's a pretty vicious blocker, so that could have made a lot of sense. But I think Wright earned the right for me to at least to put him in here now over putting a UDFA over him, and I could have drafted a tight end. It's just not how the draft went. The guy that I drafted, I liked a little bit more spot, so I'm just going to say Hockenson and Brock Wright, and I think Brock Wright going into year 2, I think he's going to be able to improve big time, because last year he kind of came onto the scene, but now I think he can improve big time. Move you on to the receiver position, and this is where we have some changes. So we got Josh Reynolds, of course. He's going to hold down the X receiver position. I don't know how much versatility he has outside of that, but that's okay. We know he's reliable, and even if he can't start, it's not a super expensive contract, but you got to have the depth. We know that. We got to have depth. And 2, he just balls out with golf. It's just simple as that. Quintez Cephas. I actually think Cephas could serve better maybe in a role that keeps him off the line of scrimmage. Not to say that he can't play on the line of scrimmage, because he plays with a ton of physicality. Don't see a ton of separation sometimes in some of his route, especially against some of those very physical outside corners. But we know how physical he runs his routes. Can absolutely take a hit. Could work over the middle of the field out of slot. He's lined up everywhere for us, and he came on big time last year in the 5 games that he played, especially when we lost some of our outside guys. So Cephas will be a nice get back for sure. Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's just a beast. I think he'll be playing more of a slot role based on what we did in the draft. However, Amon-Ra St. Brown, he's a stud. You can put him all over the place, and he's going to ball out. Then, of course, Alec Pierce. I think he fits more of that stretch the field kind of role, play action rollouts. I think he'd be an awesome target. He's also really cool in the red zone, so you could throw some 50-50 balls there, and then outside of just having Hawk, you'd have a jump ball, go up and get it type of threat, which we really don't have. We don't have that guy that we can go out there and run a fade to, right? But now you kind of do with Alec Pierce. At the same time, I think there needs to be some development within his route running. Play a little bit more of a role that's less dependent on that and more about stretching the field, and he could be that big field stretcher for the Lions, possibly get some more opportunities to make plays with the ball in his hands. Then you have David Bell, who I think is probably going to take Josh Reynolds' spot at this point as your X receiver, even though he can also play slot, which is a cool trait about Alec Pierce, because he could play slot as well. Like, he played big slot and he became an issue for linebackers. He just gives me some Tyrell Williams vibes in the ways that I thought we were going to utilize Tyrell, the way that we could utilize a guy like Alec Pierce. You can have him in motion, you can put him inside, you can let him go to work on linebackers. He's got a lot of speed. Just gives me some of those vibes, good athleticism, and he could just improve some of that route running. For a guy like Bell, I think he would probably take the X receiver position, because he's just such a smooth route runner. Some of these quick hitting play actions, he would be awesome. He'd be awesome in the intermediate routes, underneath, anything that you could get the ball in his hands. Not scary maybe after the ball is in his hands as much, but I think he's just going to be open, and on timing routes he's going to be a problem. And that's our new change, is I'm bringing back Khalif Raymond. So wasn't really sure who to have in this role. I just put Benson there before, but I don't like that. Khalif Raymond. So it's not a huge move, but I re-signed Khalif Raymond to a pretty cheap deal. I don't know how much his market it's going to look like, but I did move it up a little bit from last year's, which was less than $1 million. So I'll sign him back on a 1-year deal. All right, this could be a longer deal, but I'm going to go 1-year deal for Khalif Raymond here. Look, Raymond, you saw the charts. The production, he got some good production for us, and he's a nice punt returner. He was an awesome punt returner for us last year, so he brings that element. He's a nice blocker. We saw him on some trick plays. I don't think he needs to be a starter, but it's not a bad backup option. And he brings you a little bit of a small, more gadget type of receiver that you really don't have with this group. You got St. Brown, but you could use another little gadget guy. Raymond is that, so why look anywhere else when we already got it? On the offensive line, Decker, Jackson, I mean, look, nothing's changed here aside from the fact that we got Brown back, we got Kramer back. I have him listed as a starter. He'll compete with Stenberg for that spot. And then we have Cornelius Lucas, who I'm going to say is the 8th offensive lineman, can play swing tackle. Very reliable if you need him to step in for a game. And he'll compete. He's going to compete big time, because I already signed the tackle, but I also didn't want to pass on Kellen because I really liked him. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to take him. I'm not going to pass up on him just because I signed a 2-year, cheap contract to a 31-year-old offensive tackle. So they'll compete, and maybe Kellen takes that role from him. But I love the healthy competition. Maybe you're rolling with 9 offensive linemen. Don't matter to me. But for now, I'm going to go with Lucas because I've seen what he is. So I'll put Lucas on this. Defensive line. Ooh, this makes me so happy. Levi, Ali McNeil, Michael Brockers, Logan Hall, John Pennicini, Pedarian Mathis, Bruce Hector. That is scary as heck. I mean, those first 6, oh my goodness. Guys, that's a freaky D-line. That's freaky right there. I mean, Levi's got to take a huge jump. And I want to just count on, well, he's got to take a huge jump, and then if he doesn't, we're in trouble. No. Hall's going to push you. You don't take a big jump, Hall's going to take your spot. Mathis will take your spot. Someone will take your spot if you don't step up next year and be the guy who we know you can be. Ali McNeil. Look, he's already got guys like Pennicini pushing him. Mathis could also give him a little push too, but McNeil was balling last year. Brockers. He's a nice vet. He really is. But now he'll be able to rotate with a Hall, with a Mathis. Dude, I just love this D-line. You're going to stop the run. You're going to get pressure. That is a dominant D-line. Let's build on what we started last year, and let's be scary in the front. In the front. Let's be fair and scary in the front lines. I don't know where my English is going. Outside linebacker, we got Romeo Okwara, Aiden Hutchinson. Woo! Oh my gosh, stop. I'm getting hype again. That's scary. I mean, come on, man. When this front group rolls out, and you got these defensive linemen rotating in. Here comes Logan Hall, and then bam, here comes Levi. And then you got Aiden Hutchinson, you got Romeo. Here comes Julian. Guess what? Here's Charles Harris. You're like, what the heck do I do? We should dominate teams on the front line, and it's going to make everything else better. It will, man. Julian Okwara took a nice step next year, and I think he looked better as a run defender. Not great, but he definitely showed us some pass rush. Awesome. Austin Bryant, and then, of course, Charles Harris. Yeah, these teams are going to have a problem. Inside linebacker, we have Derek Barnes. He's going to be asked to take the Mike position next year. I believe that. I think he'll play side by side in this scenario next to Chad Muma. Then backing up those two will be Jalen Reese-Maben, who will get re-signed. And then we have Aaron Hansford, he might end up being a 5th inside linebacker here. And then Josh Woods, of course, who we just re-signed today. Or yesterday. So Josh Woods, Hansford, those two can compete for the bottom spot. But they kept 5 inside linebackers, I think, last year heading into the year. So I'll just rock with that. Moves you on a cornerback. No changes here, except for the fact that I'm just going to list Will Harris as a corner. I think you just stick him in that role, and he's going to be a cornerback. Now, Castro Fields, if I would have drafted him, I probably still would have stuck him on practice squad because of where I took him and just because we have so many cornerbacks. But Castro Fields is nice as well, man. I think that'd be a nice pickup, and don't count him out. Never count out UDFAs. You can't count out UDFAs anymore with Aubrey Pleasant and Aaron Glenn in this staff. It's just not a thing. On the safety, we got Tracy Walker III. I got Nick Cross. We got Jordan Whitehead. We got DeAndre Houston Carton. We got McKinley, who I just put in there, but he's on the practice squad probably in this scenario. Oh man, I feel like we got better everywhere. And then special teams, Cyber, Daly, and Fox. You could go with Riley Patterson. Either one's fine with me. I just left it with Cyber. The point is, I think we got better everywhere. I don't see the Lions overlooking receiver. I think they'll dress it. We did it with 2 higher picks within the top 112. The second pick in the draft was a receiver. Tight end, could have upgraded it more. I think we already got a nice stable running backs. Offensive line got what it needed, which was a nice tackle that you can rely upon to help you out. Defense got a massive overhaul upgrade in my eyes. I think the front 7 got really scary really fast, and the safety position got a massive upgrade, which it needed. So that's the 53-man roster. Leads you to a projected kind of practice squad. There's only 15 players. There should be 16. But we got the tight end Calcaterra. We got Castro Fields as a corner. We got Godwin Igwebuike, who I did bring back as a running back, who can, again, be a kick returner, compete for that spot, compete for a role week by week to possibly be on the roster over a guy like Jefferson or Reynolds or something like that. Garbers, Montez, those are 2 quarterbacks, so maybe one of those 2. We can really replace any of these UDFAs with any player we want. It's more about the position rather than the player. I'm just saying Garbers. Montez, Steven Montez could be brought back. I mean, they kept him around all year last year, and they protected him every week. Javon McKinley, Tavante Beckett, some carryover. Same thing with Shane Zylstra. Logan Stenberg. I can't count out Logan Stenberg because he played so well in last year's preseason. I don't want to count him out. I'm not counting him as a starter. I don't want to count him out, though, because he may surprise some people. Landman, the linebacker, as we touched on. Jesse Lemonnier. We have the slot receiver. I don't know how to say his name. Geiger? I actually don't know how to say his name, but I've watched some of him. Matt Nelson, Mark Gilbert, Javon McKinley, for real. We already said that. Verone McKinley, and Kelvin Diaz. So at the bottom there, you can see I added LeBron Ray, the defensive lineman from Alabama. He's probably going to go undrafted. We'll see. Doesn't really have much production, but he has a monster build for what the Lions are looking for. 6'5", 285 pounds. I put him in there kind of as replacing Jayshon Cornell because I ended up cutting Jayshon Cornell for cap reasons. But you could just keep Jayshon Cornell. I think we'd still be fine with the cap here. So this could either be LeBron Ray or it could be Jayshon Cornell. I just put LeBron Ray kind of as a placeholder, as a different UDFA name. We've talked about him a few times. Or you could put a guy like Jayshon Cornell here because I have Bruce Hector on the active roster. Draft was kind of expensive. I think it was pushing like $15 million in cap hit. It was like a $15 million cap hit with the draft because of the high picks that we had. But overall, man, we stayed under the cap. I think bringing back Raymond's nice. I just think we got better. I just think we got better at all the spots we needed to get better. What could I wish I could have done? I would have liked to add another tight end, maybe through the draft. Running back would have been cool to get someone to compete with Godwin in there, but I think Godwin just needs a year to just work on controlling the football because he did have some nice runs for us. O-line, I like it. I hate the fact that I got to put my fifth round pick on the practice squad. Maybe you just find a roster spot for him and keep 9 offensive linemen. Nothing wrong with it, but I just want to make sure I protected that position. Other than that, I do like it. I don't have a problem with any of it. I didn't want to reach for a quarterback just to do it. So based on how the draft went, I didn't want to take a quarterback. So that's just how it went. I'm not against taking a quarterback. It just didn't fall the way I wanted it to. So I didn't want to reach for one. So this is our mock off season. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It's probably a long one, but it was fun. Thank you, for watching. Give me a grade, and I'm out.